What is up, Starseeds? It's Sid, and today we are going to be talking about my breastfeeding journey, which involves mastitis. That was a really big part of it, and I want to say, like, at the beginning it was a big part of it, but really, I mean, even thinking for even a second, I'm like, no, that added to the whole entire journey. That affected the whole duration that I was breastfeeding. So, we're going to be getting into all of, especially like the beginning story, how I ended up like getting mastitis, and then how that affected the rest of the journey, and just like little things I did along the way. So the reason I'm making this video now is because I've been done breastfeeding for I think over 2 months now. To be honest, I don't remember the exact day that was like the last time, but it has been at least over a month, and I think over 2 months now. I stopped because I got an ear infection and I got antibiotics for it, and I didn't feel comfortable breastfeeding while on those antibiotics. And while I had been trying to wean my son, basically since he was 1, I really wasn't trying that hard, but once I got on these antibiotics, I was like, yeah, no. And he caught on really quickly. Like, people always say when they're ready, they stop. And I do think that is true. Part of me wonders how much longer he would have wanted to if I didn't kind of lay down the law and was like, yeah, no. But I breastfed for over 2 years, and I think that is amazing. I didn't think I was gonna breastfeed for 2 years. I thought, we'll try it, we'll see how it plays out. And then when I got mastitis, I was like, this either means I am stopping now and I only breastfed a week, or it means I'm gonna have to keep going until he's done. I was like, this is either like I give up now, or this is gonna be a long time, because having mastitis, I don't wish that on anyone. Like, when I think back to my breastfeeding journey, that is what stands out. Mastitis, nursing to sleep, and I wouldn't call breastfeeding for just over 2 years extended breastfeeding, but like some people do. Some people think that if you feed any baby over, like, honestly, some people think over like 2 months is a lot for breastfeeding, and then they think you should do formula, and that just is really mind-boggling to me, because formula has only been around for a short amount of time, like what, 100 years-ish, give or take, but yeah, formula hasn't been around that long. Formula has a terrible backstory, and I also want to point out that there's no shame to parents who use formula for their kids, because I totally understand not wanting to breastfeed. I totally understand not being able to breastfeed, because I was almost in that situation. So I definitely get it. However, I also am a big breast is best person, and I don't feel bad about that either. So I don't know, wanted to get that out of the way, I guess, because I also, when I got mastitis, I was like, so I was overproducing milk in the beginning. When I was still in the hospital, they were like, do you have a breast pump? And I was like, no, I just want to like nurse, like breastfeed, no pump, no bottles. And they're like, well, like, you get one free with insurance, and when you're in the hospital, like, we should show you how to use it now. And I was like, okay, sure, like, might as well, I guess. And so I got a pump, and I didn't even try it in the hospital. They said they were going to show me how to use it. They never did. When they were showing me like how to breastfeed in the hospital, the thing they emphasized to me the most was, do not bring your breast to your baby, like hunching over, like bring your baby to your breast, or else they're always going to expect you to just like drop your boob into their mouth, basically. And that was like the one thing they just kept on saying. And I was like, I feel like I'm doing that, but whatever. And it wasn't very helpful, and they're showing me all these different positions to try to hold him in, and I'm just sticking to the same one. I have one position for this side, and then one position for this side, and like, that's it. Like, I don't do the whole contorting all these different breastfeeding positions. No, I have the 2. Like, that's it. And they were also like, don't let your baby make any noise, because let me tell you something. The first week of breastfeeding is weird. And then once you get past that first week or 2 weeks, it's completely different, in my opinion. I don't know if it's like that for everyone, but it's like in the hospital when he was just a little teeny tiny baby, it was just like completely different, like totally like different kids, you would think. Like you wouldn't think it was the same person that was breastfeeding anymore, because at first it was like he's learning how to do it. Like he was just born. Like you kind of have to, yes, there's that instinct for sure. Like the baby, you know, like smells the stuff coming off of your nipple, and that's how it knows where the nipple is. Like your nipple turns when you're pregnant into kind of like a dartboard, and it's like boom, there's the target. So it's like it's easier for them to see. They smell it, they know it's instinctual, of course, but it's also like there's still that fully getting used to it. It's like how a bird like kind of learns how to fly. It's also instinctual, but it's like once you really get on earth and try to do it, it's like, oh, you gotta like learn a little bit. So that it's kind of similar for babies breastfeeding, although I would say it's probably a bit more instinctual than birds flying. But anyways, so we're kind of learning together, right? And so it was different because he latched pretty good, but as a little tiny baby, he did have like a little bit of issue latching, probably not as much as other people and other friends I've had say. They're like, oh, they just can't get their kid to latch right. Like now thinking back, like I did have those issues, but it was only for a week, maybe 2. But there was also this like, it was like, don't have your baby make a noise. That's what I was talking about. And so he was falling asleep a lot because he was a newborn baby. Like, they sleep. That's the thing they do the most. So I'm trying to keep him awake so I can get my milk to come into my breasts. So I would make this, like, little sound that sort of sounded like a baby sucking on, like, for milk. And, like, the lactation people were like, is that him making that noise? Don't want to make that noise. That means he's not latching right. And I'm like, it's me making the noise. It helps him stay awake. And they're like, oh, okay, I guess. It's like, I'm the mom. Let me do my thing. I just didn't really like the lactation help I received from the doctors at the hospital post-birth. The pre-birth was like phenomenal, but then post-birth in the hospital I was at was just not great. Anyways, so there was also like nipple confusion because I didn't want to use a pacifier. Like I wasn't like totally opposed to it, but I didn't even like really plan on like pacifier being a thing. I was like, I don't know how I feel about that. So after my son was born in the hospital, there were like, he woke up quite a bit, and he woke up quite a bit up until me stopping breastfeeding like 2 months ago. That's when he started finally pretty much sleeping through the night, because he would wake up as a comfort thing to nurse. So in the hospital, he would wake up a ton because he just wakes up a ton naturally. Like that's just him. So he was waking up a lot, but in the hospital he just kept on nursing for like hours at a time, and it was because he was trying to get my milk to come in. This happens with every baby. If you're trying to breastfeed, they cluster feed. They try to have your milk come in, because the way your milk comes in is from a baby like sucking on your nipple for long periods of time repetitively. That's how it really gets your milk to come in. If you choose not to breastfeed, I don't know exactly what happens. I'm sure some does, and then you just kind of like let yourself dry up or whatever, but that's how you get your milk to come in, is the cluster feeding. It's natural. And so I wasn't really made aware of this. I wasn't made aware that mastitis was a thing. I wasn't made aware of cluster feeding. There was so much that I just had no clue about. I knew I wanted to breastfeed. I was like, I'm natural. This is natural. We're going the natural route, you know? So I was kind of like, what the heck is going on? And the nurse at the hospital was like, give him a pacifier. He needs a pacifier. Like that's what will like allow you to get sleep. That's what will allow him to get sleep. You guys need sleep. This is unhealthy. You have to give him a pacifier. So me, tired, trying to be a good mom, was like, okay. It was it ended up okay, but for a few days after that, I was like, that was the worst decision ever. So because I gave him a pacifier, he had like terrible nipple confusion. Because after that, he was confused what was a nipple, what was a pacifier. Like, he didn't want my nipple, he only wanted the pacifier, or he only wanted, vice versa. It was whack. And then this is what made the nipple confusion even worse, was a couple days after he was born, when we went to like his first checkup. We went home from the hospital, and then it was like the next day or the day after that, it was like his first doctor's appointment. And then I said, like, yeah, I think my milk came in this morning because, my boobs are completely different. They're like rock hard. And then she's also, this was like it wasn't a doctor. This was like a nurse, someone who was like training to be a nurse, but she was already a lactation specialist, which, mind-blowing how that's possible. But anyways, she was like, well, let me feel. Oh no, your milk has not come in yet. And I was like, excuse me, my boobs weigh way more than they did yesterday. Like, I think I know. And she's like, I'm telling you, your milk's not in yet. I was like, okay, I guess I'll trust you because you're the expert, right? So, also, the thing that played into this was when we got to this doctor's appointment, the nurse before weighed my son, and it was like a couple pounds less than when he was born, which it's normal to lose a little bit of weight, but not that much. So keep this in mind. So then she had me breastfeed him, and then they weighed him after the fact, and he had gained like a few pounds. And she was like, that's not possible. I'm like, well, they must have weighed him wrong when we got here then. Like, I don't think he's lost that much weight since he's been born, and clearly he couldn't have gained that much weight after one feeding. And she's like, yeah, I think you might be right. And she's like, but I still don't think your milk came in yet, and I still think you should supplement with formula. And I was like, seriously? And she's like, yeah, like, but I think she did that just to kind of like prove that she was right or something, even though like she was clearly wrong. Like, she admitted that, like, yeah, we weighed him wrong. But it's like, I think she was kind of still trying to go with that narrative in order to make her seem like she was, like, she knew what she was doing or something. So she like insisted that I supplement with formula. So a handful of times my son did get formula, but literally, I think it was that night that I woke up in the middle of the night a few different times, but I felt like so freezing cold. So I went and I got some more blankets, and like at this stage my son was like fresh little baby, like you could still swaddle him because he was only a few days old. So I put more blankets around him and all of that. And then this is, like I said, this is, for those of you who don't know, this is like before you don't put blankets in the crib. This isn't blankets in a crib. My son didn't use a crib. This was when he was in a bassinet and you still swaddled him because he was that little tiny. So anyways, so I get him more blankets or whatever, and then I get myself more blankets, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so freaking cold. And so I live with my mom. She was home then. And so I was like, Ma, I need help. I'm freezing. I'm dying. I don't know what's wrong. So she gets me the thermometer. We take my temperature. It's 106.2 no matter how many times we take it. Throughout getting mastitis flare-ups, my temperature had been over 105 multiple times, over 106 multiple times, you guys. Which I didn't think was possible. I thought you couldn't really get over 103 or else you like die or something. Apparently you can get to 104, but it's only if you have, I forget the few things. It's if you have like a super bad infection, or if you have, what is it that Jacob like claimed to have in Twilight? Mono, a few different things, or like a really bad infection. mastitis. I didn't know mastitis was a thing, had no clue. So I'm like, well, I must be like deathly ill, like I don't want to be around him. So hardest thing I ever had to do, I left him with my mom for a few hours. I went to my dad's because I was like, I need to stay away from him. I don't want to get my baby sick, yada yada. And then a couple hours later, my mom's friend texts me and is like, it sounds like you have mastitis. I was like, I don't know what that is. And she explained it to me a little bit, and I was like, so I'm not contagious? And she's like, no, it's an infection within you. Other people can't get it. You're not sick. I was like, but I'm like sick. She's like, no, like you have a clogged milk duct. You have too much milk. You need to go feed him. I'm like, oh, so like I can feed him right now. She's like, yes, you can and you need to, or else this is gonna get way worse. So I was like, oh, okay. I race back and I feed him, and it goes from feeling like rocks to feeling like, I don't know, potatoes, and it slowly got better. But that feverish, chills, full body kind of like ache, low energy, the worst I have ever felt from a sickness by far, but yet still having that mom instinct to keep going. It was something. And that first flare up was probably the worst, but then I got the hang of it because I had been pumping a little bit too since I found out that, like, yes, my milk is obviously in and it's way more than I need. So like I thought I had to relieve myself by expressing like the excess milk. Should not have done that. So by this point I had already like kicked the pacifier to the curb, and the formula, which lasted like a day. So the pacifier plus the bottle from the formula and plus the bottles from pumping milk, and then occasionally giving a bottle of the pumped milk, like I don't even know. I was just trying to like help my body, I guess, and do what I thought was right based on what the doctors were telling me to do, when I really should have just listened to my own intuition, which from the get-go was telling me to just go the natural route. But anyways, like the bottle, the pacifier led to terrible nipple confusion, and that just like extended this period of like uncertainty as to whether or not this whole breastfeeding thing was gonna work out. Like added on to the fact that I was not feeling good from the mastitis because I couldn't get over it for a while. So anyways, once I finally was like, I'm not gonna pump because I think that's throwing me off, because I was so scared to pump in the first place. Like this machine attached to like a very sensitive part of my body just did not sit right with me. I have heard horror stories of pumps like pulling nipples off, and that just freaked me out. Once I like got the hang of it, it wasn't as scary, but it still just like felt weird. Like my body knew that it was not a baby, it was a machine. And like at first I was like, oh, once I got the hang of it, I was like, oh, this is amazing. Like, how do women in third world countries do this whole mastitis thing without a pump? And then I realized the pump was adding to the mastitis a lot. So anyways, my son never really took a pacifier after, I don't know, the first couple weeks of life. He realized once he got over the nipple confusion, he knew he didn't want anything but the real thing. Like, so he would just play with pacifiers like they were like a toy or something, and hold them in his hand and like throw them up in the air and try to catch it. And that was pretty much it. So I'm glad about that, because I don't know how to wean off a pacifier. I can't imagine. So anyways, kicked pumping to the curb, and I was just breastfeeding on demand, and he was a hungry dude. Like, he's always ate quite a bit of food, and yeah, that helped me get over my mastitis, but also it led to more milk production because he was feeding a lot. And like, seriously, I've never heard of a kid eating much more than he has. Like, it was just a lot. Like, I don't know how many ounces, but it was often, and it was a long time, very frequently. So it was just a lot. But I think that kind of led to me getting, because I had had mastitis before, a flare-up. I think that led to a couple more flare-ups after the fact. Like, if I didn't have that first initial mastitis flare-up, um, I feel like I would have gotten over like these clogged milk ducts again easier, because I was very good about massaging. Like, if you end up getting a clogged milk duct, which is what mastitis is just like when your milk duct gets clogged so much that it leads to mastitis in your body, like having an infection. I was very good about massaging, and just like there's all of these different massaging techniques that, I don't know, I read up on a lot and I tried to do certain ones, but I just kind of did what felt right. Like, you know your body best. So that's what I was doing, was a mixture of what I read online plus what intuitively I felt was gonna unclog it, you know. So I was doing that, and like I was eating healthy and I was de-stressed. Like, the only thing that was kind of stressing was was the mastitis aspect. And I do think I was overthinking it, which added to it as well. Once I knew that like I had had this before, I don't want it to flare up again. That leads to the flare-ups. But anyways, besides the mastitis, my breastfeeding journey was pretty awesome, because when I went to work, I was like, I need a job where I can breastfeed and is like accepting of that, and where my son can just like come to work with me. So, duh, a daycare. Like, it just made sense. And when I went, like, even for my job interview, I remember, like, so I breastfeed a lot, like, I don't know how exactly this is gonna work. And I was like, I'm gonna need like breastfeeding breaks or something. And my manager was like, well, you know, if you work a full day, you'll get like a half-hour lunch break. We do bathroom breaks in between, but I don't know if that's gonna be like long enough for you. And I was like, I don't know either. But it worked out good. Breastfeeding right before we left, breastfeed during my lunch break, breastfeed right when we get home. And sometimes at the end of the day, that looked like breastfeeding in my car before we left to drive the 10 minutes home. So that's just what it takes sometimes, you know, because I'm someone who, I'm not really afraid to breastfeed in public. I just don't put myself in a lot of public situations. Like, I've breastfed at the beach, I've breastfed in my car quite a bit. I've breastfed at family members' houses, but I usually just go into another room, just simply because that's what's easier. That was what was easier for him to do, because he would get distracted pretty easily. But yeah, I wasn't ashamed of it at all. The only thing that, like, I don't know, it kind of bothered me a little bit is when family members were like, oh, so you're still breastfeeding? And it's like, yes, dude, my kid is like 6 months old. Like, yes. Or even when he was 1, like, yes. Like, once he hit 1, it was like, I just didn't want to talk about it anymore, simply because everyone in like was just so like, it's not like my family was judgmental, but it's like, I don't know, it's not like they were like super supportive. I mean, some of my family was just like, don't you think he's like a little old? And it's like, yeah, I'm weaning him off or whatever. But in reality, it's like, I want to let him go as long as he wants to go, you know? You shouldn't feel ashamed of that. But some family members, you just, you know, they're traditional. You don't want to get into an argument with them. And it's a sensitive topic for a breastfeeding mother to talk about breastfeeding, like, as she's an active breastfeeding mother. Like, talk about it when your kid is done breastfeeding. Talk about it before you have kids or something. But to do it while you, like, not like while you're in the act even, but that would be the most awkward. But just like while you have milk in your breasts even, it's like that's kind of awkward to talk about, because it's like you're in that situation. Anyways, that's probably the hardest part about breastfeeding for over 2 years, is like the stigma of it. For some reason, I don't really understand where that came from. because usually it's people who drink cow's milk that are like telling you like, why are you breastfeeding your kid? It's like, he's a human drinking human milk. He's a baby. Like, he's not an adult drinking another animal's milk like you are. Like, that's just, it's mind-boggling to me. But I don't know, if someone hits you with that comment, hit them right back with, then why are you an adult drinking another animal's milk right now? Like, don't you think that's a little weird? A little bit weirder than a baby drinking its own mother's milk. I think so. I think it's weirder than that. But I nurse to sleep. I feel like a lot of people, if you breastfeed, usually that's what you end up doing. My son, he would take a nap if we went on a long car ride, or he would take a nap occasionally if he was absolutely exhausted, but usually it was like he would get exhausted or just a little bit tired, breastfeed, asleep, bada bing, bada boom. But that's how he went to sleep every day for his nap, unless we were in the car for a long time, and every night unless we were in the car for a long time. So that's how he went to sleep. So that has been the hardest part about not breastfeeding anymore, because now he does not take naps. If we go in the car for a long time, then he will, but that is, few and far between. If he's watching a movie, sometimes he'll fall asleep, but it's few and far between. He just, ever since I stopped breastfeeding, he hasn't been napping. But he's been going to bed a bit earlier, so I'm hoping that makes up for it. He gets, I think, a healthy amount of sleep, so yeah, it's just given me less time to myself. But now it's like, I feel like I have been done with the breastfeeding journey for so long, even though it's only been like 2 months. It really, like, I thought I was gonna miss that connection so much, but it's like you have that connection in so many other ways, just, rubbing his back to fall asleep instead of nursing to fall asleep. It's similar in like a lot of ways. You still have that connection, and you get to still cuddle, and and the way that I weaned him, because like I had been trying to get him to drink almond milk or oat milk instead of breast milk, like ever since he turned 1. There was this whole year, the whole half of the journey, I was like, I'm down to quit when you are, but he just wasn't ready yet. But once, like right after he turned 2, and when I got this ear infection, I was like, okay, it's almond milk tonight. I will hold you in my arms while you drink your milk out of a cup, but that's how you're gonna go to bed tonight. And then the first like 2 or 3 nights, he had a big issue with it, but I told him that milky's done now. So then the next month, he told me every night, that milky's done now. I drank it all. Every night he said that, because that's what I told him the first 3 nights. And then after the 3rd night, he just started saying it to me, and I was like, yep, that milky's done now, you drank it all. And that's just how we did it. But mind you, he was over 2 when we did that. And that's my breastfeeding journey. This was long, but the journey was over 2 years, so keep that in mind. If you guys have any questions, I would love to answer them, or other topics that you want to hear about. I have a long list of topics that I want to do, so I'm not short on ideas, but I'm always open to more. So thank you so much for listening. We usually talk about more out there spiritual, scientific stuff, but breastfeeding is that, okay? This is what I'm passionate about as well, so I wanted to make one video at least on this subject. So thank you for listening. To all the moms out there, or just people who care about this topic, guys and girls, whatever. I appreciate you. Peace out.